Hello friends, David here, and I just wanted to do a little series of videos about the figure collection that I've inherited from the late Rick, who I've spoken about before on the channel several times, but most recently in a video where I very quickly showed off some of the large swaths of his collection that I received, which, well, to me is large, but certainly by all accounts is merely the tip of the iceberg, really. So I wanted to share these videos as I suppose, a tribute to Rick, but also as like a way for people to sort of see what's in the collection, and so that if we were to see these figures again at a later date, we will know where they come from, and you know, why we have them here with us. So this is a quick run through of all the 15mm figures that were amongst the collection that I inherited. So I thought we would quickly whip through those so everyone knows what's here, and then these will then obviously be added to the broader 15mm collection, and I'll have a quick chat about what I intend to do with them. Naturally, I have my colleague here with me. She's helping out, currently enjoying a good scrotch, as you can imagine. She'll settle down in a moment. So what we'll do, look, she just wants attention. Yeah, she'll settle down in a moment. It's all fine. So I thought we'd begin with the largest part of the collection, and then we'll move on to the sort of smaller pieces. But before us here we have a large collection of what I can only assume is a Mongol army, or was intended to be a Mongol army. So I'm not quite sure what the best way to do this is. Not particularly exciting to look at, other than to say that there are various figures here from mostly Essex, from what I can gather. So there's these packets of unpainted figures, MOAH, I think, one MOA1, MOA2, and MOA2A. So there's like heavy barded cavalry types in here. There don't seem to be any that are not that are out of their bags yet, so these appear to be still very much bagged up. There might be odds and ends that are loose, but these bags here, there's it looks like there's about 6 per bag, I think. I can't quite tell. 1, 2, 3, 4 per bag of heavy cavalry. So these are barded cavalry types. These are the MOA 2As, which I found amongst the collection. Also amongst the collection was MOA 9, which is a camel kettle drummer. Sorry, let me put it over here. So it's pretty difficult working like this. The lamp is over here. So a camel kettle drummer and a standard bearer. Then also more MOA 2s, not the 2As. Now the difference, as far as I can tell, between the two is that the MOA 2s don't have barded horses at all. The horses are just unbarded, but they have the same armoured riders. Then to sort of finish out the Essex Mongols, from what I can tell, there are some general figures. So MOA 1 packets. Again, I'm not going to bother taking them out because, if you want to see what they look like, you're free to check the Essex catalogue. They'll do much better justice, I'm sure. But there were also a couple of sticks of the MOA 2s that were glued on sticks in sort of in a semi-painted fashion. Again, same thing. This is how you can see that they don't have the barded horses. And then it looks like Rick had begun on a command stand with the camel and then a general figure, and then 2 camel kettle drums. So obviously, sorry, one of them has a hand for a standard or a spear, but he's not the same figure that we saw earlier. So that's the Essex components. So that's the bulk of the Essex lot. Now you'll notice that there are still several riding figures. So there are some more Essex figures, like this one here. In fact, there's a little subgrouplet of them over there, 6 figures. I think these are all Essex, and I think these ones might also be Essex figures, just based upon comparison to the catalogue. One of the things with Rick that is good and bad, I suppose, was that he was very much somebody who would mix ranges. Obviously, they'd have to roughly fit together, and so what you see here is this sort of square here, or this rectangular section. I'll zoom out a little bit so you can see better. This section here is all sort of light horse Mongols from the Essex 15mm Mongol range. But then what you'll see is a couple of dudes like this who are a bit squatter, and they have these really hefty limbs. Let me see if I can give you a better shot of that. But if you look at, so just by way of comparison, let me see if I can just draw a decent sort of focus there. But if we take one of these chappies like so, and we put him next to the guy next to him, you'll notice that the fellow on the right, I think that's a Donnington figure. Horses are roughly the same size, but the Donnington figure is a bit heftier. He just seems a bit more chunkier, a bit beefier, if you will. Looks like he's had a bit more to eat, I suppose. He gets in amongst the kia, or whatever it is that the Mongols drank. And then to the left is the Essex figure. It's a bit slighter, but they are very, very compatible, I think. You know, this guy just looks, maybe the guy on the right looks perhaps just a little more bundled up in his jacket and all. But anyway, so there's Essex in there, and there's Donnington. Those I were able to identify. And then back here is more Donnington. And the way I found that out was I searched online. Oh, you hear little tippy taps there. I searched online using image search. It wasn't particularly helpful because all image search would do was say, "Oh, that's a Mongol, you know, warrior on a barded horse," and you know, then it would say, you know, Warlord make figures like that, which I suppose goes a long way to tell us what the you know, who's the big dog in that, the big 100-pound gorilla or 1,000-pound gorilla or whatever. The point being is that these figures with the shields and their like appear to be Donnington figures. I was able to find out the company that carries Donnington today, who I do not remember who they are, but it's not Donnington selling them anymore. They must have sold the molds on, but they're nice figures actually. I've never seen any Donningtons in the flesh, 15mm wise, because it's not the range I've ever bought. And then down here there are some more. You can see they're in a halfway state of painting. Now what I'll do when I do get to painting these, I will probably just apply a wash to the horses and keep Rick's original work intact, as such as it is in this case. Obviously he's not done an awful lot, but you know, he painted the horse, so I feel like I should probably honour that by leaving as much of the figure intact as possible. And then if we keep panning across, you'll see there's more of those lovely Donnington figures. I really do quite like them. They are a little bit chunky, but that's actually a good thing, I think, at these scales, because you can really pick up details, and you've got big fat surfaces, higher surfaces to highlight nice and brightly to make the figures pop, I think. Now, I mentioned earlier that Rick had this propensity for mixing ranges, but he also manufacturers rather, but he also had the knack of mixing ranges. So there's some odd things I found amongst the stuff here. So in this little area, let me zoom out and show you what I mean. In this little area here, where you see these based figures and these 3 cavalry, these are actually from the Essex Tang range, right? Or Tang, I guess, the Chinese. The Chinese horsemen. There's 3 cavalrymen there, so it looks like a single blister's worth. And then there's figures that he'd stuck to bases, but I think these would have been based probably for like Almaty or DBM or something. They're 40mm wide, I think. Let me just double check that. Yes, they are indeed 40mm wide and about DBM depth deep. But the figures are, you know, it's probably easier if I just zoom in from a static position. But I just simply again cross-referenced the Essex catalogue to see what it was. So there's some crossbowmen, some more crossbowmen, and then some spearmen. And I think that the intention was that they would form sort of like infantry levy type figures. And he used, presumably for the Chinese, so these would be like Kublai Khan's Yuan, I don't know how to say it, dynasty. Then there's also some Huns that I found here. So these figures, which I'll show you in a moment, sorry, I think they've only been shuffled around recently. These 5 figures are Huns. They're single piece castings, which is actually quite nice. But they are from the Hunnic range, so they are not really Mongols per se, and they've got these lovely Phrygian caps. If you can see this fella here, let me zoom you in, and hopefully you can give you a better view. Excuse the camera's trying its best here to focus. Let's see if we can get it to pull. Let's see. Come on now, you can do it. I kind of feel like I need a macro lens or something, you know. Anyway, tad out. There you go. So you can see a little nub there at the front. That's this Phrygian cap, sort of thing a Scythian might wear. So I think probably these were just meant to be kind of generic, slightly Western Turkic riders. You know, the costume is, I mean, a nomadic horse rider is a nomadic horse rider, right? You know, he wears a pair of trousers, he wears a kind of kaftan jacket type job, and maybe he has a little fur hat like that, or he wears a Scythian cap, Phrygian cap type thing. But this guy is what gave it away for me. That skull shape. Apparently the Mongols, the Huns, reshaped infants' heads when they were babies, and gave them these kind of weird cone heads. Which is what made them so devilish to Westerners when they finally rocked up in the Western Roman Empire. So there's some Huns that are knocking around here as well, who I suppose could do duty as sort of Western Turks. Again, I probably imagine my friend Sam over at Corvinus Wargaming has some thoughts about that. Then these are Seljuk Turks, so they have those lovely tall sort of Sufi hat-looking things. If you've ever seen like Sufi dervish dancers, you'll know what I'm talking about. Kaftans, you know, the tall sort of fez-like hat. There's probably a proper name for it. Again, Sam will probably know. And there's about 7 of them there. Now again, I'm not sure if the Seljuk Turks would really blend with the Mongol army. But again, if you think kind of your Golden Horde, your Western Horde, your Ilkhanids, you know, the various Turkic peoples who ended up rolling all the way through to Asia Minor, I can't imagine it's impossible. So I'm sure we'll find a use for them. But Seljuks are a little earlier than I would have anticipated. They're more for the Crusade period, if I recall correctly. But again, I defer to greater minds than my own. So that's the sort of Mongol collection. So obviously minus the bags of figures which I've shown you, there's quite a fair bit here, and I think there's a good makings of a solid steppe horde going on. And then potentially with a sort of like Chinese contingent to help bulk out the ranks on the infantry side for, you know, storming a castle or something like that. So yeah, there's a little bit of everything there, but a lot of horse archers, and I think, you know me, I bore painting cavalry, but I think in this case I shall have to make an exception. But absolutely lovely figures, and again, something that would be a pleasure to have on the field, I think, and quite useful just in general, because, and I think I've said this before, and I think many have said so before, but a sort of Mongol army is quite a versatile thing, right? You can use it for anything from you know, various horse peoples who fought and served for the Chinese, and various other states that sort of border the steppe, and they can serve over a very vast period of time as well, from you know, from before Genghis Khan all the way through to, you know, your Golden Hordes and so on, and your Crimean Tatars and all that sort of jazz. So there's quite a vast swathe of history that are quite well served by man on horse, you know, with spear or bow. So I think we could probably get a fair bit of usage out of these as even though they would be Mongols proper, as sort of stand-ins or as sort of ringers for various armies. So yeah, I think pretty nifty. I'm not an expert on Mongol armies by a long stretch, although I will recommend Genghis Khan, or Genghis Khan in the Making of the Modern World. I really enjoyed that book. It was really quite something. And at the moment I'm reading a book that I got from the library called The Horde, which is specifically concerned with the Golden Horde, or what became the Golden Horde, but the Western Khanate that sort of forked off the main Mongolian project, if you will. So anyway, that's this collection, and then what I'll do is when I get back, there'll be a little break here, and then we'll get back and I'll show you something else. Okay, so I mentioned that the Mongols were famous for their siegecraft, and so I think, and again I can't say this with any great degree of certainty, but I believe that Rick may have intended these siege engines, which I'm going to show you now, to have been for use with either the Mongols or perhaps just as general, or generic rather, siege equipment. Sieges are not something that are very common in wargaming, but I think they are something that could have quite a lot of interesting gameplay tied to them. I think there's a rule set called Vauban, which is a set of rules for sort of later sieges, fort assaults, that sort of thing. And I know that Sam, from Corvinus Wargaming, has toyed with the notion because he built a castle and all. I think there's quite a lot of interest to be had in a sort of wall assault type scenario. You know, you only have to think of the great sieges of history, Malta, Rhodes, both of which obviously involve the Knights of St. John. But yeah, various large sieges that would be quite interesting. And then, of course, the Mongols famously, you know, utilized basically anybody who knew how to read and write and could put together siege tools or whatever to be part of their war machine. So this is a siege tower. I don't know who the manufacturer is. There's no identifying information on this pamphlet that comes with it. I've looked online. I did a cursory search for 15mm siege towers. I didn't really find anything, to be honest. And again, this is something that's been highlighted a few times. Ralph talks about it relatively often on his channel. Is the fact that, you know, manufacturers come and go. So this may have been manufactured sometime in the 80s or 70s even, and then subsequently the manufacturer has just gone out of business, and that's the end of that chapter. And so we'll never know who made it unless somebody here recognizes it, or at some later date I happen to come across the, you know, who the manufacturer is. But there's a sort of unfortunate sort of lack of sort of memory, if you will, in the wargaming space. But it's a lovely piece. You can see how it fits together. It's got this lovely sort of hide covered front, and it's got little extra accoutrement that sort of fits it all together. So what I'll do is I'll quickly show you that. So there's the wheels and some cross braces there and some ladders. And then I found amongst the stuff, this was all labelled 15mm siege equipment, but there's a very clearly 28mm ladder, siege ladder, that was also in amongst it. So that's a separate thing altogether, naturally. But I found that, yeah, then there's these side pieces, and it's all very nicely made. You can imagine it's going to be an absolute nightmare to put together and keep together, because, you know, metal doesn't do too well when it's just super glued. So I may have to look at slightly more secure means, such as perhaps using some sort of resin glue type thing to just stick it all in place. But very nicely made, and I'm sure it'll paint up lovely. But I'm thinking here, like any of the many sieges that I mentioned that the Mongols were involved in, or that the Ottomans were involved in, or anyone was really involved in. I suppose a siege tower is a siege tower is a siege tower. So that was the first of the equipments that I discovered amongst the stuff. And then I'll show you some of the others now. Also amongst the set was two of these battering rams. So this one's still sealed in its little original bag, but unfortunately there are no instructions, which is a problem, obviously, because putting these things together looks quite challenging. Just again, there's a lot of metal, it's very hefty. So I'm sorry, excuse my hands, but I'm trying to reach around the camera to do this. But it's designed to basically slot together. And then you've got these lovely, like again, the animal skin type, you know, toppings or covering. It locks in like so, and then on the side you have these side panels, which are supposed to be wood. And then here in this little baggie, oh, here's the actual ram itself. As you can see, it's quite a solid piece. And again, I'm sure something that we could make use of if we were to put on a siege game. And this is one of those chicken and egg things, right? It's like I would never really think of putting a siege game on until now I have this in my possession, and suddenly I'm like, well, I suppose I better get it built and painted up, and we need to do a siege game sometime. Here's some more pieces that come with it. So this one here has little, sort of bolts on the ends, little nipple type things on the ends. So this one has it on the tops, on the flat part there. So there's that and that, and then a bunch of these extra skins, which I'm not sure where I'm supposed to put those. Maybe you're supposed to stick them on the sides, I don't know. And there's little wheels here as well. So it looks to me like the wheels are supposed to, these the bottom here, this side panel has little holes. It looks like the wheels go in there, into these little holes along the bottom plank there. I think it's supposed to be like that, but I couldn't say right now. But we'll find out, I'm sure, when it comes to actually putting the bloody thing together. Now, I looked online for this, and again, I can't find anything. As part of me suspects, like you can see, this is supposed to be a noose, essentially. Like this one here is actually done. It looks like you're supposed to hang the ram from it. So I think it's supposed to slip over or whatever. Probably supposed to undo it and then wrap it around, like with this one here. Probably have to put this in there and then wrap it around to sort of suspend the ram when it's in its holding. But again, I can't find any instructions for it. This looks like the nose of the ram over there. You can see it's kind of got a metal sort of, zoom in a bit, you can better see better. It's got like a metal kind of crown type thing, like a helmet almost. So there's no instructions with it, which poses a bit of a problem, I suppose. It's not insurmountable, I don't think. I think we can figure it out. It's one of those things where I'd have to sort of dig around, either try to figure out myself. The alternative, of course, being that I'm lucky somehow, and I find that some kind soul on the internet has got this and built it, or that some retailer sells it, and then I'm able to figure out what the plan was with it or whatever like that. But I'm sure at some point we will figure it out, or if anybody knows what these are supposed to be and how they're supposed to work or whatever, please do give me a shout. I appreciate the help. If you've ever seen a set before, if you know who manufactured it or anything like that, even better if you've built one yourself, that would be the gold standard, I suppose. So I said 2 battering rams, one still brand new in box, never been unsealed, and then the one that has been unsealed. And then there's, I think it's one more thing to go. So yeah, one more thing to go, which I'll show you in a second. Okay, the last of the siege equipment is a trebuchet. Always a classic. The parts list and the sheet is with it on this one as well. It looks to be by the same manufacturer who made the siege tower that we looked at. Yeah, so again, very interesting piece. I think the way you can kind of see how this fits together. I mean, you've got this long cantilever section, and then there's the actual weight itself there, which presumably is filled with rocks and such. That forms the counter thing, and I can see, what is this for? This little piece, probably for the ground. Probably sits behind, so it looks like it sort of sits. Let me just sort of roughly lay it out. I think it sits like this, and then there's a bunch of odds and sods in there. There's even a dead horse. Maybe that's for loading and firing as well, I don't know. But yeah, lovely piece. I think, again, I don't know who the manufacturer is. The instruction set doesn't really make it clear. Unfortunate, really. But it is what it is. I'm sure that if somebody does recognize it, they will let me know. And if they don't, it's not the end of the world, really, when it comes down to it. I think we can live without knowing everything all the time, right? But anyway, so yeah, the trebuchet, which, I mean, this thing is quite large. It's 15 mil probably. Well, I would guess it's 15 mil, just based on the size of it. But massive piece of metal, to be honest with you. Like, it's always slightly kind of daunting when you want to try to put something like this together. It takes my mind back to those of you who have been around a while will remember things like Games Workshop, like dreadnoughts and that sort of thing, when they were made out of metal, and there were just these enormous hunks of metal with really quite several points of failure that loved to fail. So they're always a challenge to put together, because gluing metal on metal with super glue can be quite a finicky process. The bond isn't necessarily that strong, and so figures that are stuck together like that tend to have the knack of sort of bursting apart at the slightest light breeze. So we want to avoid that. But I'll say one thing about siege equipment, I suppose, and artillery and that sort of thing is, I'm partial, as much as I despise painting horses, the converse is true for artillery and things like siege engines, right? Because you'll have remembered a few months ago I just boshed out a quick Crimean cannon for my Russians, and I also did what you call it, a sort of English Civil War, 30 Years War, sort of Renaissance era gun as well. And I did that because they are the perfect weekend palette cleanser. You can start on a Friday and you can be done by Sunday, and you can say that you've done something, and you get that real dopamine hit from having accomplished something. So perhaps these siege engines will have their moment in the sun on the channel as something that gets painted over a weekend. So, you know, never say never. Regarding the trebuchet and the siege engine, obviously I have the instructions for those. The RAM, I'm going to be a little bit more tentative and say, until I can figure out exactly how it fits together, I'm going to just err on the side of caution and not take a punt on that. So I have one more thing to show you from the 15mm collection, and we'll call it a day. Okay, our final little stop on this tour of the 15mm inheritance is 15mm Essex Anglo-Zulu War figures. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag here. So there's a, you can see here this entire block is OC 59, which are lancers, and the lancers are just to the left here, and the riders are all here and the horses are all there. So I can only assume, and I don't know this, but I can only assume that Rick had in mind a Anglo-Zulu War project which involved lancers. Now I know he had a 28mm Zulu War collection. In fact, he built Rorke's Drift and did a Rorke's Drift game. One of the other members of the club inherited the 28mm collection. So that's grand. No doubt we will hopefully run a game of Rorke's Drift one day with that collection as a sort of homage. There's some Lancer officers which are OC 60, so there's 3 officers I think in the bag. Won't take them out now, you're not really missing out on much. So it looks to me like he had this idea that he wanted to use these figures for something, and then, but then there's also seems to be some samples here. So for example, we'll zoom this section in. So like, let's just double check cap. We've got the Lancer officers in the bag there. We've got the Lancer horses, 20 of them, 16 of them, and then we've got another 16 riders and their lancers, right? And then here we've got the Naval Brigade figures. So these are OC 68 and 69. These are on foot. So I think this must have been a sample pack or something. If I was to try to do the archaeology for this, similarly, Frontier Light Horse mounted and dismounted, and Natal Mounted Police. Natal Mounted Police wear these lovely sort of home service helmets with a spike on top. You know, they look really grand, like a Bobby's helmet, cross with a pith helmet. Really cool. But yeah, I suspect he may have got this as a, well, again, I can't read the man's mind or know what he was going through it, but this seems to be a rather odd mix in the sense that some of this appears to be sort of speculative sample packs, if you will, such as the stuff on the left here, and then obviously a very clear commitment to purchase a lot of lancers on the right. Not sure what I'll do with them. Zulu War is not something I've ever really felt all that much of a draw towards, probably because I lived in Natal for a while. And I just don't find it a particularly interesting conflict. You know, maybe it's the old familiarity breeds contempt thing. Not that it's contempt there, it's just I'm not that interested. But yeah, I mean, as a boy living in Durban, my dad built a bunch of cell phone tower projects near places like Ulundi and places like that. So I've obviously done all the battlefield tours with him, and he built one at Isantloana, which we visited. Not something I've ever really considered, but that said, again, how many of these projects start with a nudge, right? So I've always rather fancied doing the Sudan War in 28mm. Obviously, I've got the Cape War stuff that I'm doing in 28mm. Who knows? Maybe the Zulu War gets done in 15, but we shall see. I mean, we've got these figures, so we may as well use them for something, right? So we'll see what happens and where our mood takes us, right? Never know. Never say never either. So for now, these will just go into the collection along with the other 15mm stuff. I think the Mongol collection probably has the most immediate appeal in the sense of it, and along with siege engines, is that it is something that can get done, and then you've got something usable once it's completed. This is different animal, I'm afraid. We'd have to paint up figures and then, you know, figure out, okay, we'll round out the collection, so to speak. It's not like a self-contained unit, I suppose. There's just not enough of it, really. So we'll see. But yeah, that's it. That's the 15mm collection. As I said, I'm doing this as a way of, you know, remembering this moment, but also sending a nod to Rick in the sky, so he knows that his figures have a new home, and that I'm sharing that with the world so that everyone else can see, you know, what a great man he was. And yeah, stand by. There will be more videos as we go through the collection. I'm still sorting stuff through. There's so much of it. I might do books next because that might be a little bit of an easier one. It's not quite as vast as some of the other stuff, but we'll see when we get there. All right. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you later.